Look at me, all dressed up, all ready to go. Okay. It's Monday, another day with Bambos and Andy
In August
in August. It's a
2021.
humid, kind of muggy type of day.
Humid?
Humid? I think so. Wouldn't you call it humid? Like
No.
the air feels like it's got moisture in it.
No.
Okay, maybe not. Well, doesn't really matter because we're here regardless. It's Andy and Bambos. We're going to be discussing what, Bambos? We're going to be discussing the Talkaboutable. And where are we going to do that on?
I don't know.
Me as well. See you soon. Anything.
Don't touch anything.
Just don't touch anything.
Don't touch anything. Expanding the untalkable.
No.
What
The
was it?
Talkaboutable.
The talkaboutable. Expanding the talkaboutable.
Yeah.
Did something come up for you?
You know, but I don't know if it was Bolalong who said this or if it was Stephen Palmer in the US, but somebody at some point said, actually, what they see the wonder of life is this expansion of the Talkaboutable. And when they said that, and I reflected on a lot of our shows, I realized, well, that is actually what we're endeavoring, is trying to create topics that people in general don't want to talk about and giving them space to make them talkaboutable. So one of the terms that we've used says we create space. So we create space. But I also feel like, Friday's show was about suicide. And it was not an easy show. Obviously, for you, we saw at the end, it was a lot of intensity. And what I'd say is that people will tend to avoid that intensity.
Yeah.
And then in avoiding it, because they don't want to feel the charge of it, the emotions that come up.
Yeah.
And what comes up for you?
Well, I think the most dark show we've had was with Chris Correll.
Yeah, the Dark Night of the Soul show.
Yeah.
Yeah. But on that show on Friday, like we did end pretty abruptly in that we didn't necessarily need to process it on air.
No.
But you had a lot of emotions come up. And for me, you allowing space for that to just be present and let us kind of feel into what came up and then let it be on air. That's, for me, expanding the Talkaboutable. And for some, it's really not easy. And therefore, they say, listen, I tell you, I had two sides of my family. In the Catholic side, because mom was Catholic and dad was Jewish. On the Catholic side of my family, we really did not discuss things that were going on. There was a quiet tone that you don't talk about those sort of things. So I would say the Talkaboutable space was pretty narrow.
Yeah.
On that Catholic side of the family, my mom's. And on my dad's side of the family, the Jewish side of the family, like everything was Talkaboutable. And even to the point where it was almost on the boundary of, God, is this appropriate, right? I told you some of the stories of what my dad would say, but that was also to provoke.
Yeah.
So I guess the thing I thought was nice to discuss is, like, how important and beautiful is it when we create more spaciousness in ourselves to allow topics to be discussed. And that's what, for me, a lot of what we do on A Wonderful Chaos is just let things that might not be comfortable to discuss. On very few occasions, we don't bring a show on because it's just too intense or too uncomfortable. We did one recently, which we didn't bring on.
Which one was that?
I don't know if we should talk about it, but I do know we both agreed
Oh, yes.
we both agreed we could make space for this, but actually, I don't know if I really wanted to make space for it.
It wasn't only about us though, right? It was about the person.
True.
Like, he is a friend,
Yeah.
and he has like, I'll just keep it anonymous, but he has a kind of autism,
Mm.
so he's not aware of social boundaries.
Yeah.
So in a way, by bringing him on and him talking about what he had to talk about, could destroy his life.
Yeah.
That's what I saw.
We couldn't preclude that he would be judged, and even though we might try to create a space where it was more talkaboutable, others listening would say, "Hey, this guy is an idiot," or whatever they judge him as.
So I actually, after you messaged him and said we're not going to have you on the show, I also called him and I just shared that I was responsible and the reasons, and he was grateful because he says, "Yeah, you're right. I don't see these things."
Yeah. I did the same with another one of our friends who wanted to come on to have a talk.
I remember.
And I could see that I think when we edit ourselves on this show, we edit to protect the people coming on the show. Because if we were like sensationalized only, what we would do is we'd say, "Oh, great, they're ready to leave themselves vulnerable," and not consider the consequences of them being on the show. We do have one show, which I don't want to reference the names of them, but there are some sadder moments because some people have come on to our show, been very vulnerable. We expanded that talkaboutable space. But what I also saw was that the families of some of these people weren't comfortable or ready to hear what they had to say.
Yeah, I remember.
So that is also a challenge for us when we do this. And I've been more aware of it. A lot of times people say, "Hey, I'm okay," and then at the end they don't necessarily know the consequences because you can only know afterwards. Yeah.
Well, I think the first 100 shows we did, I had the tendency to be very vulnerable, like a lot,
Yeah.
show myself. And at some point, I mean, there were moments I would go home and I would be shaking a bit because did I just do that?
What's changed for you now?
Awareness.
Okay.
Awareness that I don't need to do that all the time. And like, if I see that it's going to serve the whole,
Yeah.
I'll be like, yeah, let's do this.
Oh yeah. So you don't need to be vulnerable. You can, but you don't need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know when I used to do trainings with my mentor Case, who died, as many of you know. And when he did trainings, what I noticed was that there'd be a group, and sometimes it would be hard for the people in the group to be vulnerable. So what I saw was sometimes I would need to, I say need to, but I would need to accelerate or help to accelerate the process by sharing a vulnerability in the group so that people felt safe to do the same. So I'd lead the way.
Yeah.
And I see that's something that we certainly, I don't think we do it intentionally, but I also say I want to be an example of what I'm asking others also to be. So, being vulnerable on the show is part and parcel of being here.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is also a reason why on some of the shows we won't pick is if we've discussed it, of course, a few times. If someone comes on and says, "I'll come on, but I don't want to discuss a specific topic," and if that topic is like central to everything going on in their lives,
we don't do it.
Then we just don't do it. Yeah, because in the way it's like we can't tiptoe around the reality of the life, then it's not authentic anymore. Yeah. So I think when we discuss like the talkaboutable, I also see that we make sure the conditions are there that we can talk about things. Because I mean, we've gotten into really heavy duty. Like if I look back at the themes we picked on the show, then we've really picked a lot of intense topics. There's certain weeks when I know when we did, like we had that one week of only World War II survivors, the people who had trauma from
Holocaust camps,
all of those shows. Those are holding space for that also is not always comfortable, because if you're holding space and you're allowing yourself to connect with them, you're letting some of that in. So
But now we're talking about this topic, and it's kind of segmented to the podcast. And then how do we create conditions? I think that's what I really remember, to have these conversations also in real life,
yeah,
in everyday life.
you know what the funny thing is I think this is something that we've also learned, and I mean, it's not nice to say this, but I'm going to say it anyways, is that I've seen that when we have people that are not sort of 40 or above, it's a very different talk.
Yeah.
So when people are still trying to be something or present themselves a certain way,
Have an identity to
a
protect.
strong identity to protect, then I notice that the talkaboutable is like more confined to the space that they're comfortable. And it doesn't only have to do with age. That's I know that's also being
It's just a
generalizing.
general thing.
But it's true. The consistency that at least I've seen is that the older one is, the more the talkaboutable will expand, because they're not taking offense or defending their identity as much. It's not always true, obviously, but it's less so.
Just based on the 259 shows we've done so far, people.
Just so if you're in the category of young, then please don't take offense, even if you're offended. But yeah, that's something that we've discussed it as well. That's so the talkaboutable for me is also a question of how attached are the people we bring on to the beliefs that they have, because what I'll say is that we can hold space for that. We can make it talkaboutable, but how much of it is it a dialogue, like where we're both learning from one another, and how much of it is just the two of us holding space for somebody to let off steam or share their point of view?
Yeah.
And we could do either or, but I certainly find when we're connecting with people and it's more of a dialogue where we're both learning and growing, that there's something magical in that experience. And I think people, from the feedback that I've gotten directly, is that they discover new things on each show. So it's not only that we have the interaction, but they go away realizing things that they didn't realize before.
Yeah, definitely.
Like one of my favorite shows, which is now available on podcast. You know which one I'll point out? I love when you smile, because I have an idea.
I smile because I want to kind of have a banner like, it's this one.
But do you know which one?
No.
I'm curious, because I told you I really loved it before. I didn't know if it would hit you again. The Mariana, her life as a karaoke waitress. And
she's not 40 though.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the whole thing, is that it's not only about age, as we agree, but there is a general trend. So, but the thing that I found beautiful about that is that she learned about how intriguing that life was through our reactions to her answers to our questions. Like, I think she wasn't even aware how strange and unique that job was until she saw how we reacted to it. So, and I think the beauty of that is that clearly, like, she will be more vulnerable the less she feels judged, right, in the interaction. So the expanding the talkaboutable for me is always a direct consequence of how much judgment is brought into through our questions. So the talkaboutable gets smaller the more someone feels triggered by judgment and what we ask them. The less judgment they feel, the more open they are to say, hey, I can say anything, and these guys are going to be open to listening, even if they don't necessarily agree per se. Yeah.
Nice.
Bolalong, as always, is joining us. He's asking us if we planned the color of our clothing today. We did.
Andy, what are you wearing?
I said I'm wearing a jacket. I'm wearing a coat.
Okay, I'm going to put the polo.
This is a Ralph Lauren coat, Bambos, just by the way, just in case you were wondering.
No, I wasn't.
It's got a tissue paper from a few years ago in it. Bolalong also writes, Friday show.
I always love this extra information that you bring in.
Yeah, because I just discovered it. Nothing better than blowing your nose live on a podcast.
Friday's show left me emotionally drained.
He said it left him emotionally drained for lack of good words to explain it. Yeah. As I always say, one of my favorite comments after a show from a person who listened was, "Am I supposed to feel better after your shows?" Question mark. Am I supposed to?
Was that
That was
towards the cemetery one? Death
I don't remember. It was one of the Cypriot people that's now in my network.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd love for the topics that people have where they're not necessarily talkaboutable, that I'd love for those also to be suggested to us, because it's that space where it's less comfortable to talk about, where we all learn and grow. That's where life becomes a little bit richer and more interesting. And if we know of anything at the moment, is that people are pretty siloed in their understanding. Yeah. Bambos, what are you doing to me? Bambos is playing with our green screen, so all of a sudden it looks like I'm fading away in the
floating
ether.
head.
Yeah.
Oh shit! Sorry. Is his name?
Cass Midgley. We were playing with our green screen. You can edit all this out the podcast. Our apologies.
So how can we bring this topic closer to home right now? Because we're talking around it as opposed to
okay. So on the weekend, I was with Ronnie.
Yeah.
And we were driving to Belgium, and Ronnie has a reaction.
Yeah.
If someone pulls in front of her, she immediately swerves to the next lane without putting on a turn signal or looking if anyone's there.
Oh, wow.
And it happened.
How do you know that she's not looking?
I know, because car, switch over, the next car in the next thing starts to beep. Maybe they yell at me and get aggressive.
Towards you?
Well, I mean, they're angry, so they just yell at anyone in the car, and so the swerve happens, right? Yeah. So they swerve and then they get angry, and so basically what happens is that the first 2 or 3 times we talked about it, we said, "Hey, like, what's going on?" And I could see there was a defensiveness in it. So the space that we could talk about it did not exist. It was a bit like, I know. And then I said, okay, but it's still happening. And then what I saw was that there was a negative reaction pushing away, and there was no dialogue. There was no talkaboutable space.
Mm.
And so that happens a few times. And I think the second time I was like not giving a lot of space. I was like, we have to heighten consciousness around this, because it's dangerous. It's not a game. Like, I was really like, if 2 times you could have gotten an accident. The 3rd time, now we're just waiting for an accident. It's just going to happen. It's just a question of when. Because if you swerve directly into another lane where the car is next to you, then that car either you're going to hit it, or it's going to hit another car. So what I saw was that we had this discussion. It was like, how do we address this? And it was interesting, because it falls back a little bit on all the principles that I live by. Is that, firstly, are we aware that it's a problem? Do we acknowledge that it's a problem? And up till that point, the discussion was Ronnie would acknowledge it, but it was often acknowledged with resistance. Like, yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem. I know. Okay, like, get away from me. I don't want to talk about this. And I said, like, and as we started to discuss it, it was like, no, it's not a question of like, is it a problem in the sense that, I've got to shame myself about it, but is it something that I see has to change? Can you elicit wonder around it? Can you actually, instead of it being you judging yourself and saying, I'm this or I'm that, can you just say, wow, this happens. Let's discuss what's going on and what makes this happen. And what happened was, we went from not talkaboutable, because it was defensive, into another space, which was, what goes on inside of you? What's occurring? What triggers such a quick reaction in you?
While she's driving.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And what I saw was that the talkaboutable comes when one isn't judging themselves.
Or when the person asking the questions, in this case, you is not judging the person, but you're coming from a genuine curiosity.
Yeah, or, I've had people judge me, and I still will allow them. I still won't judge them. I mean, I'll still be open to them. So you're right. It certainly helps. If you're being judged, it's not really easy to say, "Oh yeah, let me take your question seriously."
Yeah.
But yeah, agreed. So, and I would say when we're together, that I'll often feel like we're doing a great job when we are fully present, creating space, and we're increasing again and again the talkaboutable. Yeah. And the
Nice.
talkaboutable mean the things that maybe one wouldn't, because they would be too anxious about how it would make another person feel. And so they let that space. And so inevitably what happened was, and this is the humor, is that in allowing it to be more talkaboutable, there was less of a defensive trigger in it, which meant that immediately Ronnie was more relaxed and she became a better driver. And when I say better, meaning less reactive, because if you're feeling less shut down, you're not defensively driving against traffic anymore. You're like, oh, look at this guy's pulling out. Okay, I'll slow down. That you're more present in the moment instead of reacting to a past tense or a tense tension that you hold in yourself. Yeah. So when you asked me, so we went from a situation between two of us where it was not talkaboutable, and I was okay with that because, hey, she can say. But by the third time, when I saw that it had an impact on maybe killing somebody, I said, hold on, this can't be not talked about now. And we found each other and we created the space, and there was a lot of learning, because the learning is that, and this is the weird thing about different minds, is that I have more of what would be associated a female mind, and Ronnie has more of a masculine mind, in the sense that Ronnie says, how do I solve it? She'll immediately ask how to solve something. And I'll say, no, let's first feel what's really going on here. No, I don't want to feel it. I just want to solve it. And then I laugh and say, yeah, the way you're going around this is some of the challenge we're facing. Can you see that maybe there's a way of also addressing it another way, where in addressing it another way, you'll solve it, as opposed to saying, I need to address it the way I address it. And we've often had that, that way of looking and experience the world differently. And I'm okay with it most of the time, I have to say, because I don't get to decide. But as I said, if I feel like there's a life-threatening issue that's not being resolved, I start to set a little bit of boundaries.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And it was a really beautiful talk, and we learned because of it, for sure. What comes up for you, by the way? Because
I'm really taking it in. It's almost like this is part of your new book.
Oh yeah, exactly. The third draft of the book has gone out, so I've been told I need to tell more personal stories in it. So these might be the stories that are brought into the new book. Yeah. Bowl along as well. Thank you for always being there. He writes, we could not keep on coming back here at the Wonderful Chaos were we not benefiting from each show.
Nice. Burilang, I like your new profile pictures, by the way.
They're not new. He has new and old. He's got two different profile pictures on at the same time.
No, on the Facebook one.
Oh, the Facebook one. Great.
Very nice. As humans, we can pick up when the intentions are not pure, then we close up. Sometimes we shut because we know we are wrong.
So Bola Long writes, as humans, we can pick up when the intentions are not pure.
Yeah.
Then we close up. Sometimes we shut just because we know we are wrong.
We want to defend. Yeah.
That's beautifully stated. Yeah, that's the hardest thing, is to stay open when you've done something that could be apparently experienced as wrong. Like that's really that's like the most critical moment to allow yourself to be open. And yet it's the moment which is hardest to be open.
Yeah.
Because we want to protect, especially if we know we've done something that's not right. And I say not right, I mean, you know what I mean. Yeah.
I'm sitting here and I'm having trouble thinking where in my life, in my interactions with people, there is no talkaboutables, and how I navigate those. But even with this woman that I'm seeing at the moment, we have a ritual every morning. We have a 10-minute each check-in. Like,
Okay.
how was it for you? How was yesterday? Did anything come up for you? Was there a closure? Was there an expansion? And it's kind of become a ritual with our hot chocolate and with our coffees, and because it's a 10 minutes where an individual talks and the other person is just listening, so there
Yeah.
can be silences. Like, you can always see when things come up.
Uh-huh.
And I noticed through those 10 minutes, it's because there is no judgment, no one's going to cut you off to defend anything, there's space. So I've been using that in interaction to get to know her better, and also for us to hold space for each other.
Have any issues come up that were not easy to discuss?
Nothing. Like, that's what I was sitting here. Was there something that we've talked about everything, even things which haven't been very comfortable, including me not wanting children and she potentially wanting children.
Okay.
But it's been what I see in our conversations is that there's a lot of respect for each other,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of love. So as we're sharing, uh, she's not trying to convince me of anything, and I'm not trying to convince her of anything. It's like, oh, this is what it is right now, and
Nice.
it's just there's an allowing from both of us to unfold.
Yeah, yeah. And so going back to a little bit about expanding the talkaboutable, I would say that the degree to which either of you, through your acceptance or allowance of the talk to be, creates more of the talkaboutable.
Yeah.
And I'd say if one of you was saying, really? I don't think that's a good idea, then immediately that would shut down what can be talked about, because you'd feel implicitly that there's some judgment or some ideas of good or bad.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at anything especially as, I always like to point at the US, because I feel like it's such a petri dish of the perfect storm, where you have obviously two different parties which have two different ideologies, which are propagated and, depending on what social media or what TV station you're watching. So in a way, the US has severely made very small the talkaboutable.
Oh yeah.
So you can talk about certain things in small groups of people who already agree with you. But outside of that, it gets really complicated. And the hard thing is that, everyone feels self-righteous, like they have the truth. So either fringe of a very, very liberal or a very, very conservative, they're actually no different than one another. And that they're both so stuck in a belief.
Pointing fingers at each other.
Yeah, but each one would say, no, my belief is that I'm more open, and then they create the justification for that. And so that's an example where the talkaboutable space gets really, really small. Yeah.
Especially when the beliefs are dominating and there's no space for exploration, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd say, I don't know, on our show and this 260 odd shows coming up, like, I don't feel there were there were shows I thought where I would try to help a guest that I thought that they were kind of stating things a little bit in a way that could be judged, to reframe it. And you laugh, on some of the shows, you'll see the guest, they appreciated it, and other times the guest doubled down and they were even more offensive. It's like, okay, if you want to go there, I can't help, Yeah. There was one show that jumps out at me in my mind that I'll never forget, I'm not going to talk about it.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
What in you would not like? What part?
Because that's a good question. Because if I name it, I can name it, but then that guest was also here, and he was, or she was, our guest. And
there's no need to throw them under the bus.
Yeah, and then what's the safe space we create? We can have our experience, we can laugh at our experience, but by stating it in a way that doesn't give them a chance to even defend themselves, then it just doesn't feel like it's being taking the risk they took to be on our show seriously. Like people do take a risk. We ask them. Everyone who watches our show knows the first question we ask them before they come on is, "What do we not talk about?" Because we can go anywhere, and then they'll say, "Don't talk about this or that," and otherwise it's open.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I feel like when you create that much space, there is some degree of responsibility that, hey, I'm not going to then afterwards analyze the way you responded to things. Yeah.
Wonderful. I had I do have something to share. So I had a dear friend. She's actually has been one of my biggest fans in terms of my photography business when I first started.
Yeah.
And in a conversation, it happened 3 years ago. Something happened between us, and I was in scarcity and fear. So I felt that she was interfering in my business in a way that I didn't feel comfortable. And because I was coming from fear, I shouted at her.
Okay.
And for her, that was a boundary, and she didn't talk to me again. And, I tried to reach out to her several times, and there was nothing.
When you say you shouted at her, can you give me a context of what that sounds like? Could you role play it for me now? Like, what would it have been like?
Well, she was strong in what she was saying, and then I raised my voice and being strong in what I was saying.
Got it.
So in a way, I didn't feel the spaciousness in me to hold space for her to hear what was her intention, and the other way
Got it.
around.
Okay.
So I reached out again last week,
Mm-hmm.
and this time there was a response, and we I saw I felt excited to talk to her, but also okay, what does this conversation mean? And when I got on, I saw that she was still in the pain of our last conversation, and I was like, oh fuck, she's really carried this.
Wow.
And she said, before we do anything, I really want to talk about what happened.
Wow.
And I'm like, I'd love to hear what your version of the story is, and then I can share my version.
Okay.
And then she shared her version, and she said, she said that I also cursed
Okay.
in the moment. Even though I don't have recollection, I could see that it's very possible that I did.
Of course, yeah.
So she said, before we do anything, I really want to hear an apology from you, or else we can't continue this conversation.
Wow.
I said, let me share what was my version, where I
Okay.
was coming from, and not to defend anything I talk about. I do want to put it out there before I apologize. So as I was talking, I was connecting also a little bit to what she had said, and in me there was nothing that didn't want to apologize, but I saw that through the apology, an expansion happened and a connection happened, which was really beautiful. And I was feeling very grateful in that moment, because I was really scared to reach out to her, because I had been rejected twice up until that point.
Okay.
But I felt, wow, we've had such a foundation in our friendship that I don't want to let it go.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
And it was occupying a big part of my brain for quite a long time. So I see, if things occupy me, then I need to do something about it.
Yeah.
I learned that from you, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That when we talked about expanding the Talkaboutable, then the Talkaboutable would be, can we discuss the thing that's really the elephant in the living room in this case? Yeah.
Living room?
Isn't it the living room? I think that's the same. Something like that. Yeah. I had a similar situation that came up last week when I finished the third draft of the book.
Yeah.
I sent it to some people to read. And I talked to my oldest brother, Michael, and we've often had this relationship where in the past, when he's wanted to help me, he was more instructional of what I should do and less experiential, how it impacted him or what he's feeling. So on one of my walks, I always get a little bit more energetic when I'm walking. But he said,
What was that? With your thumbs, you mean?
no, when I'm walking, because I'm walking like around Fondle Park. I've got my 15,000 steps in, and then and he said something in the direction of, like, there are people, consultants who do this for a living and know how to do it, and I realized that um, the one thing that I've started to be very less interested in are the paid consultants who you pay. Then they tell you you got to pay $15,000 and all these other things in order to get the value. And then when the value doesn't come, they don't hold themselves accountable to anything. And I've just seen it so many years now. I already know the script. Like, I I can tell you how to make your business successful, and then you're going to need to invest in it. And hey, it didn't really work out like we expected, and then there's always an excuse. And there's very few consultants that'll say, "Hey, listen, I'll just get paid on the basis of your success, because I know you're going to be successful. So when you succeed, I succeed. So as long as I get a percentage of that, are you up for it? I'm up for it, right?" That would be a a way of saying sharing the risk.
Nice.
But so he started to kind of lecture me, and I use the word lecture as a soft, but tell me, like, this is what I should do, or in that direction. And I was like, I want you to read the book, but I'm not interested in any of your solutions. I want to know what your experience was. I want to know where you were touched, where you were not touched, where you lost connection with what was written, and when you felt more. So, like, I want to know your experience, not how you think the book should have been written,
Or else write your own book.
or whatever. But it was like, it was a strong. It was like, so I wanted the feedback, but I didn't want the feedback in the shape and form of, this is what I learned on how to write a book, and this is how a book should be written.
Yeah.
And so that was it was a tense talk on some ways, because I was so strong, because I'm like, I don't need that in my life anymore. I want everyone who's going to come to share whatever it is they think they can support, what's their experience with me, not what did they read in a book about something, then tell me what the book said. Like, that's not really where I'm gravitating towards at the moment.
So how do you connect this to the topic of our show?
The Talkaboutable was, in a way, when we were discussing, there are times when I would love to expand the Talkaboutable, but actually, that part of the Talkaboutable is also setting boundaries about what I want to talk about, how I want to interact. So I don't want Talkaboutable to be there without including me. So I'd love to talk to you about this, but there's certain ways that I would want it to do it. If we're going to do this, this is the way it works for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool.
Because it's not self-sacrifice, which is why on the show we've often discussed why we do or don't bring certain people on, because we're not doing this, creating Talkaboutable for the sake of Talkaboutable. We're doing it because there's something interesting, something we can learn, or something we can benefit from. I mean, look at Friday's show. Of course, that was, as we both already discussed, a very intense show.
I really, I had no clue how it would impact me.
Really?
Really, like I'm like, oh, we're going to talk about suicide. Okay, I've had 5 of those.
Yeah. But we didn't discuss it on the air. Are you comfortable discussing it now?
Yeah, sure.
So what did come up for you in that moment?
Well, as Ian was sharing, I was reliving.
Oh, wow.
And as I was reliving from where I am today, I was the 16-year-old, the 18-year-old, the 20-year-old, the 25-year-old.
Wow.
And even recent in the last 2 years, I also, it crossed my mind. And I was like, wow, it's crossing my mind now where I am. And assuming that I am more grounded, but wow, I can still entertain those thoughts and let it in.
Yeah.
And it shocked me. I had a panic attack. And I always say breath work saved my life. And I guess I haven't really talked about it in depth. Or maybe I have, but I haven't really felt it. Like, oh wow, I really had that experience again. Like,
Yeah.
and the show, the sitting with it for an hour was really like allowing me to feel it. And I did get messages after the show asking me if I'm okay.
Yeah.
And yeah,
When he described going and drinking the whiskey and taking a pill, drinking the whiskey and taking a pill, drink, like I have to say, I kind of saw the experience very viscerally. It wasn't it was no longer just a concept. It was really, so yeah, it was clear that the topic wasn't easy for you. I guess the question that I'm always have is that we don't pick topics to make them uncomfortable. We pick them to allow spaciousness to discuss them, right? So what are you saying?
embracing pain.
To create a meaningful life.
Bam.
So, okay. But I mean, we don't embrace pain for the sake of embracing pain. Hopefully pain comes up at times and we just embrace it. Like,
It's allowed.
I think some people have this idea at times that
It has to be painful.
actively looking for pain. I'm like, no, it just happens, and I'm not resistant.
That was me for a very long time, by the way.
What was that?
Well, I thought I had to suffer in order to grow, and
Yeah, I know.
and I don't that it seems like another lifetime.
When did that change for you?
Uh, when while in Cyprus and transitioning back here.
That you don't have to suffer to grow. Yeah.
And I guess being with my mother and spending those 3 weeks with her also every morning almost, and having judged her most of my life for being negative and in her head, and it's like we're still calling every day. We're laughing every day.
Beautiful.
So yeah, I'm like, what are we going to talk about today, Mom? She's like, nothing. You woke me up.
Bolalang writes some stuff as well.
Usually, we need to be sure that when we are wrong and admit it, the other person is not going to use it against us.
Yeah. Isn't that's a hard one, isn't it? Because once we've done the mistake, right? Whatever that is, whatever we perceive as a mistake ourselves, and we know we're going to admit it, then the fear is that other person is going to use it against us.
If I admit something, I'm doing it for myself, though.
Yeah, but if you look at that mind, I'm going in when Bolalang writes that, I go into like the child mind that I had when, like I remember when I was with my dad, and I was always so scared of my dad that I didn't want to tell him anything that happened because I'd be worried that he would then use it against me. So what ended up happening always was that in not telling him, he got even more angry at me because he was pissed off that I now hid it from him. So it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. My fear of him created even more tension and distrust in our relationship, and more anger from his side.
Yeah.
Till the point when he, disowned me for those 10 years. Yeah. And I think that was the getting back to the discussion I mentioned with Ronnie, was that in the world of the Ronnie, in the world of myself, you could look at how our brains are processing the world a little differently. If I do something that is not ideal, let's call it that, or I'd like it to be different, I look at it and wonder, where is that coming from?
You're not judging it.
No. What makes that I do that? What's going on here, right? It's like a reflection. It's almost like a meditation for me. And with Ronnie, immediately there's a judgment and a defense. So no matter what I say will be looked at through the lens of, I don't want to be wrong. And that's where I see the learning and the talkaboutable. Again, we use the word, it just decreases because we're not open to hearing anything because we're already defending.
Wow. When we met,
yeah,
when you were in the beginning supporting me with trying to figure out how to get my business up and running as a photographer, I remember we had a conversation. We were sitting in your kitchen one morning.
Okay.
And I was sitting there, and I remember I was feeling a lot of tension because I had a secret to share with you. And the secret was And what I told you was, hey, Andy, I'm noticing that I need something from you,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to hide that. There was I don't know
Yeah, I
what,
remember something. Yeah.
and then you told me, well, that's great. The difference is you're admitting it, and other people are, and everyone else around me are not.
Yeah, exactly.
I,
Yeah.
I really thought you were going to kick me out that day.
Before you said
I
it.
was so scared.
Yeah. Do you remember what it was, or what was it?
It was something like, you will stop helping me if you knew that like there was a part of me that saw that I was kind of manipulating.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That you were that in your behavior there was some sort of manipulation that
Yeah,
if you shared it, then maybe I would then say, "Oh my God, I'm being manipulated" or something. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. You laughed at me.
yeah,
uh,
yeah. The difference is you're conscious that you're doing it now. Yeah. I was with my nieces on the weekend. Saw the video. I got my hair done. You might still see it's. I did my hair by an 8 and a 6-year-old this weekend. Very
I love the video, and it's fucking great.
half therapeutic, half what's going to happen to me after they're done with me. They actually had makeup that they didn't quite get to because we ended too quickly, thankfully. But one of the children has a propensity to be manipulative.
I love you.
No, not that manipulative. So they want to be carried all the time. And if you don't carry them, then all of a sudden they start to cry. And then they start to like hope that they've kind of learned that hey, I can get things I want by crying.
Mm,
And I kind of laugh because with me that ain't gonna work.
yeah.
So
You hear that, kids?
all you kids out there, it's not gonna work on Uncle Andy.
I love it. Continue.
And so at some point, the funny thing was, or the not so funny thing was this, is that she says, Andy, carry me, carry me, carry me. No, I can't carry
Does she
you.
call you Andy or Uncle?
Uncle Andy.
Yeah.
Carry me, carry me, carry me. I said, no, you're 7 years old. No, I can't carry. I'm not 7 years old. I'm 6 years old. Oh, you're 8 years old. Oh no, I'm not 6. So I'll just increase the numbers, and then but she's not getting what she wants, and I'm not. If I was using the practice from hand in hand parenting, then I wouldn't tease her as this could be felt as a tease. I would just hold her and say, "Oh, I know you want to be carried, but I can't carry you." I'd give her more of that spaciousness to out her emotion, but I wasn't there, and I was just enjoying myself. So I said, and then at some point, it wasn't even that long after, she just started to cry. And she says, Andy, you're too funny. I don't like that you're too funny. She called me too funny the whole time. You're too funny. And then the other sister says, no, Andy, you're not too funny. I like that you're too funny, but the point being was that there was this tension that she wasn't getting what she wanted. And she was hoping that the tears would force me to succumb to her needs. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Give me a second.
Yeah, please.
What has this got to do with the Talkaboutable?
You talked a second ago. You mentioned something about manipulation.
Oh, okay.
And I was just following up from the manipulation talk and how that also I see shows up in different shapes and forms. If I had to think about it from Talkaboutable, when someone is manipulative, it's probably nice to discuss that because that can also happen. And let's say maybe they're not aware of that manipulation, so they're longing.
Yeah, but how do you address that though? Because like already manipulation, there's a judgment there. So how would you address it where it's not so loaded?
Well, I mean, and I get it at put values or define words in the way that I define them. Everyone gets to decide for themselves. So, I don't know if you got to that chapter in the book yet, but I spent a chapter discussing at least how I distinguish influence and manipulation. I don't know if you read that one or not. Okay. Well, in my dichotomy of how I look at it, I do see that just by the mere fact of being, we influence each other. Just by being on the show, even by being quiet on a show. You've noticed if you're quiet on a show, you'll influence a show by not saying a word. So just the mere fact of being present you're an influence. Now the question becomes, when does that influence now have ulterior motive? When do you like? I can tell you when a cold caller calls me on the phone and says, "Andy, do you want to save money on your electricity?" So that's manipulation, because their intent is for me to say yes so that they can use that yes against me in the following question. Because if I say yes to that, then basically they think they've got me. So that's
Do you say
manipulation.
no?
Yes, I know. Yeah. And then they get angry at me.
I also say no.
Yeah, I know, but they'll get angry at me.
What's your reason for saying no?
I know I'm happy with my supplier.
Yeah, I say I'm using the green energy, and they're really expensive, but I use them.
That's a good answer. I didn't have that available to me.
You feel free to use that cold can opener.
Yeah, so that would be the manipulation for me, is when the intent of the individual is not to think about your interest, but to get you to something that they want, regardless of what are you in your interest, right? Because like you just said, I'm happy paying more for green energy. Like that isn't the question. The question is, how do I get you into my funnel? So if I get you to say yes enough times, their belief is that you'll finally buy. It's one of those tactics that they use.
Do you like your profile picture on Facebook, LinkedIn? Oh, Jesus. Okay.
I don't know if that's a bad question.
No, I don't think so either.
Okay.
Burlang has a nice point here. A friend always sends me videos without mentioning what it is that they would like to discuss on those videos. It makes discussing them a challenge.
I'm sorry, Bolalong. I didn't mean to do that. I'll stop doing that.
Yeah, it sounds like if he says yes, he doesn't know what he's saying yes to.
Yeah, I mean, that's something you're gonna laugh. I spend another chapter on that in the new book, Bolalong. Context setting. These are all separate topics, but that doesn't necessarily, we don't go to Talkaboutable. We're just going to communication. Not sharing with someone your intention or the context for what you are also attaching to a message or to an email or to whatever you're sending doesn't help the other person understand what it is they should be looking or paying attention to. So I don't see that as anything more than just unconsciousness, that not stating it clearly, it makes it hard for the recipient to know where to place it.
Yeah.
You know, I had someone send me this weird question the other day. How is your dark, mysterious life? Where are you going with your, and they had like three words together I'd never heard. And I just thought, I just didn't respond to the message. It was just it didn't give me any clarity what this person wanted. It was not an invitation. It was not clear. It was more like, let me ping you to see if we can interact, right? Without any, if someone said, hey, I'd love to interact with you, I haven't talked to you in a while, then I'd say, oh, that's nice. But
did you know this person?
Yeah, I know this person. Okay. Yeah. So for me, not all that dissimilar to Bolalong. If there's no context for a message, I often don't even read it. I just think, okay, I don't know where to start with this. If someone says, I know you're looking for property in Spain, this may be helpful as a guide, then you can decide whether it's even useful to open or not.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Bura has one more comment there.
Oh, did he? What did he say? Up above? This one?
That one.
Interesting.
I was once accused by a person for what I don't recall doing. I apologize for it. However, it was not enough because they wanted me to apologize, specifying what I'm apologizing for.
I had the same situation, actually, not about a half a year ago. Like someone wanted me to apologize for something which I totally recall different than how it transpired.
Okay.
And they didn't just want me to apologize for how I made them feel. They wanted me to apologize for their interpretation of the event. Like they needed to be validated in their belief system. So there was no space to even see, oh, maybe I experienced this differently than the other person had.
Yeah.
Which was kind of weird for me, because I was pretty certain about the recollection, because there were certain things that happened at the time that I remembered. Oh, I talked to Ronnie about it afterwards, and there were things. So when the person said, no, you did A, B, C, and D, I was like, really? That's weird.
Do you want to talk about it?
No, but not on air, right? But yeah, it was very uncomfortable. Yeah, and it felt sad
Yeah.
because there's a helplessness to it. Because if you were to apologize in the details, you're actually not sincere because you can't identify with those details. So it's almost saying, I'm sorry for what happened, but I'm sorry because I was vindictive, I was nasty, I intended it. Like all these things that they need you to say so they feel calm in their heads, which isn't true because you know your own feelings, you know your own intentions.
Yeah.
So if they force you to apologize for the intentions you didn't have, it's really a really hard place to be. Yeah. So Bolalong, I'm sorry that you had a friend forcing you to take responsibility for something that wasn't yours to take.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we can always apologize. You know me, I've told you 100 times, apologize.
Yeah.
Not for what it is that they've interpreted,
Sustain relationship.
but apologize for what they felt. And not that you even need to take any responsibility, but I feel sad that they feel a certain way. That sucks.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't intend it, right? Okay. Oh, here, this is the best. Iris Offer says to us, what about people who come to the inbox and say hi? Question mark. If I've never met that person before, Iris, I never respond. I don't know. Have you ever responded to anyone that says hi in your inbox and doesn't write anything else?
I'll message back and I'll say, hey, I don't know you, so please give me a little bit more to go on.
Oh, that's nice.
And if they add me and they don't write anything, I'll say, hey, listen, I just deleted over 1,000 people in my social network.
Wow, you do some work there.
I did that over COVID.
Yeah.
Since I didn't have any work to do, so let's clean up. And
no, I meant you gave time to people who only write hi, who you don't know.
Even people that didn't say hi, and they just add me like, hey, before I let you in the network, please give me a little introduction.
Yeah.
And normally, if they do, then
fun.
Yeah, it would be like, oh, I saw a post from you, I really liked it, or
that's nice.
I love your photography. Then I'll say follow my photography work.
I love that. I've been finding people in Spain because I'm going to be spending time there now. So I have a new network of friends that I've just built up through Facebook that live in the same area.
Do they speak English?
Yeah, there's a lot of English speakers. And one of them said, who are you? Why do you want to friend me? That was the way they responded to me because I said, oh, I just saw they were connected to other people living in the area. And they were really sweet when I said, oh, I'm moving there and stuff. And then yeah. But getting to the Talkaboutable space, the one thing I'd like to kind of close with on that subject, because it is where we started, was that I do feel when you can make space inside of yourself, you can actually learn and understand other people so much better that in a way they change because they can listen to themselves speak and see where they don't even agree with themselves. I think a lot of times people have hidden beliefs and they don't even realize where they're contradicting. But when you give them the space to speak and then hear themselves say things, they'll often hear when it doesn't sound as aligned or when there's a contradiction or some kind of hypocrisy in it. And they'll often figure it out themselves without you having to tell them.
But that comes with space holding.
Yeah, that comes with space.
Like really listening.
Yeah. And I mean, it gets hard on some topics, like when, some subjects are so sensitive that it's almost like by bringing them on, we're actively almost antagonizing people because they have that much charge. So molestation or pedophilia, like two really, really horrific discussions. And yet the people who are the perpetrators of these will often have had that done to them. And separating that there are consequences for behavior and that you can still hold space for them to process, not to justify, not to validate, or not to excuse the behavior, but leave space for them to share so that you can learn and grow from the experience is something that's really hard for society to make space for, because The assumption is if you understand it, you're normalizing it and accepting it, which is not true. You're not normalizing and accepting it. You're learning and understanding what drove a behavior to begin with. And the sadness I see in society is that we're not leaving space for just to see what another human's experiences is without already judging what is or isn't acceptable.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to say it. It does not mean the behavior is acceptable or it shouldn't be punished, period. And yet you can still hold space and make it talkaboutable so that we can learn and grow from understanding it. And that's the real challenge I see, is that people can't separate that. They think if you talk about it, you implicitly are saying it's okay to discuss this and it's acceptable by societal standards, and it's exactly not that.
Yeah, I remember we had a workshop in this room actually. We did the connection games.
Okay.
And in the workshop, I really don't remember how it came up, but two people had been raped in their life.
Yeah.
And, as that evolved and that was shared, I didn't want to skip over it because I saw that it was really vulnerable for the two individuals when they shared this.
Yeah.
So as we were holding space for that and allowing the people to be seen and felt and loved, I realized, oh, wow, it's possible that there might be someone in this group that has been the rapist.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of heightened awareness that how that impacted me. Like if there is someone in this room that has been in that role, that, what did I say? It was more like, you're fully welcome to share and you won't be judged. But it's just a space. And for me, it's always a place of, who were you back then? What was going on for you? And then I realized as I spoke, we've all raped.
Yeah.
In a way of, everyone is in this room has had sex with someone when it wasn't a full yes. You felt it. The other person was incapable, but you still just wanted to have sex.
Yeah.
For example, or you raped yourself by not having a full yes, and you just allowed it to happen because you wanted to be loved and accepted in that moment. And in that moment, it was really beautiful because everyone could feel the deeper truth in that, and there was no hypocrisy.
Yeah, the challenge is that, because we also have to be aware, let's say someone actually did rape somebody, hid in a corner, and actually, so that is actually an offense.
It is an offense.
Yeah. Legally, it's an offense. They can go to prison for that. So in a way, we also have to be aware that there's a border there where when you invite it into a room and then someone says, well, I actually raped somebody because they were, at some time in my life. And like in some ways, there are consequences for them sharing that story in the group, like literally consequences. Like,
yeah.
So there is a fine line between creating the space, and then if someone had done something and they were open in that space and sharing, hey, I did this thing that was beyond, then there would be it would be an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't just say, oh, we can love you for that, and there's no consequence. Again, it goes to, if someone in the group would acknowledge that they had pedophilia, you couldn't just say, hey,
that's okay.
That's okay. So that's the challenge, I would say, in life, is we want to expand the talkaboutable, but expanding the talkaboutable also doesn't mean there aren't consequences for behavior, which is then harming others. Yeah, that's
and that's why it was really difficult.
Yeah, we can't. And I don't want to leave the show saying, oh, we'd leave that space open and not be aware of the consequences for what may come out of it, which isn't easy. You haven't had to deal with it per se, but in that sense, you didn't deal with it then. But it can come up, and
Nice.
And that's where, like where playing games or like therapy, like there's a fine line in that world where I see that a lot of times the games can go to an edgier point where the trainers might not even be aware of the door they're opening, because there's consequences for things that are then brought into the public realm. So that's something for another show. I think I have one of the shows called Creating Space versus Re-Traumatizing. That's one of the shows we have.
And where we're going to do that one?
We're going to, one of the Uplifting Monday shows. Thank you for being with us again. We've gone over our hour. Always wonderful to have you with us.
Burlang, I just want to say I appreciate you for supporting us by watching us on YouTube and on Facebook.
Yes.
But you haven't gone to LinkedIn yet.
Yeah, no, he has. He's posted on LinkedIn. He has.
Okay.
Don't provoke him, because he'll go there. He's already done it. Thank you, Paul. He says religious organizations usually do not report such cases to authorities where people admit to doing wrong.
That is true.
As a kid, Bolalong, I think you know, in my grade school, the priest was molesting the kids, and it was made aware that it was happening, and he was shipped to Rome so that he didn't have to face prosecution. And my mom was told if she was going to repeat this to anybody, that she would be excommunicated from the church. So that's a prime example of where we aren't holding people accountable.
And
Yeah.
it's not talkaboutable.
And that's not talkaboutable. And we can say anyone that says not talkaboutable usually has something to hide. Thank you for being with us. We see you when, Bambos?
Tomorrow.
On
Wonderful.
Chaos. Bye-bye.